Hello, everyone. Today I will be talking to you about Chapter 10, the Life Course Perspective. This is an overview of what we will cover through this lecture. I will give a definition of the life course perspective, and I will be discussing some of the basic concepts from the textbook, and I will be providing examples for those concepts. Then at the end, I will be discussing the implications for direct practice as well. So the definition of life course perspective is a client's or any human's experience and how it is affected by different types of factors, including your physical environment, social circumstances, historical time, gender, race, ethnicity, age, and social class. The idea that all of these things impact an individual's reality over time, that's what life course perspective is about. I do want to emphasize with this perspective that there are patterns among groups of people who share these characteristics, but people also have unique experiences. So as we are going through this, simply look at it as a lens, as a perspective. It is a way of looking at your client's case or situation. So you want to work with your clients and consider their experiences through this lens, but also at the same time understand that just because they are, for example, Generation Z, it does not necessarily mean that they have the same exact experiences or that they share particular realities with the rest of their cohorts. See your clients as unique individuals, but some of these concepts are helpful in perhaps offering a direction of exploration for your client. And it is also important to consider that all of these realities when working with social work clients, again, that your clients are not all the same, even if they share similar experiences or they come from the same generational cohort. So these are some basic concepts that come from your textbook, and we will just touch briefly upon them. These are, again, concepts from the life course perspective, and each of these concepts considers an individual's life course and how it shapes their own particular reality. So as part of a group, an individual, again, they can go through unique experiences. So as I go through this, I will talk about some possible examples, but also think about how each of these has influenced your own reality and your own lives. So first, we have the concept of cohort. So cohort is a group of people who have been born during the same time period. Again, so are you Gen Z, Gen X, a millennial? So usually, as a group, people who are from the same cohort, they have lived some sort of social reality about the same age. So you might think of people who lived through the Great Depression as children. So that might have led to particular ways of them viewing the world. And also, for example, social programs came from this period of time as well. An example that a lot of you have experienced and can relate to is living through the COVID-19 pandemic. But another point to consider in the context of a cohort is that at what age this group of individuals went through the pandemic. So it's not just the fact that all of us are going through the pandemic, but what is our age group, and how will that affect us in the future. So for example, kids going through COVID are going to be social, But at the same time, I wanted to point out that we should not develop stereotypes, or if they have not been scientifically proven. So for example, we cannot say kids going through COVID are going to be socially stunted because they were isolated. We need to wait and hold off on these kind of ideas. They are just maybe hypotheses, but we need to wait until we see scientific research and what true outcomes will be of a particular cohort. Otherwise, we will fall into the trap of generalism, which is stereotyping or having a particular belief based on one's generation. So keep in mind when working with clients that these are items to explore, but not to presume, of course. Okay, another concept is transition. Transition is a change in role or status. So transition, for example, for me would be, a big one would be becoming a mother. So going from not having any children to becoming a mother, that was a big transition for me, a big transition in roles. I was again used to not having any children and completing my education, and then suddenly during my PhD I had my first child. That was a big role change for me of becoming a mother and at the same time a student. So it was no longer just me, but I had to take care of someone else, of a little one. Another one would be when I've completed my PhD and suddenly I went from the role of being a student to then becoming a professor. So those are two examples. The third concept here is trajectory. So a trajectory is a long-term change that involves various transitions. So an example for me would be my career trajectory. So I went, from high school of not knowing what I wanted to study into college and studying business administration and having different volunteer experiences of doing different community social work related volunteer activities that led me to completing a master's degree in social work with an emphasis in community development. During this time, I had some experience conducting research. I did an internship. So when I graduated, I did a combination of macro social work and research. I worked with immigrant families and youth, helping them achieve their goals and obtaining a higher education, and also helping them apply for scholarships. And at the same time, I also worked with a research team on providing support with interviews and doing outreach to conduct research with immigrant families and children around higher education and learning more about the different factors that impacted children of immigrants' ability to obtain a higher education degree. And eventually, I pursued a PhD and focused more on research. And right now, I have been conducting research on the barriers and facilitators that immigrant families experience in the border region. So again, it has been a trajectory for me of my academic journey through social work and focus on immigrant families and children. So next, we have life event. So this is an abrupt event that has a life-changing influence. And you may see some of these may overlap, and it varies by individual. A life event that may have had an impact on someone may not been as impactful for someone else. A life changing event for me would be one, when I immigrated to the US as a child. Um, so that really marked my life forever. It was positive in some ways because I was able to have economic and educational opportunities that I would not have had if my family stayed in Mexico. At the same time, we did experience a lot of challenges as we adapted to life in the United States. So it was positive, but then also came with some challenges. But that was a very impactful life event that I experienced as a child, and that shaped who I am as of today. Like I said, both in a positive way because I now have a PhD and I'm a college professor. I'm the first generation in my family to obtain a college degree. But at the same time, there were other things such as discrimination, um, being just afraid of being an immigrant, um, and been impacted by immigration policies, and um, that also marked me as well. The final concept that I have here is a turning point. So a turning point is a life event or transition that produces a lasting shift in a life course trajectory, a point that has caused a dramatic shift in one's life is a turning point. So for example, in the book, they have different examples, such as getting sober, receiving a significant health diagnosis, leaving a significant other due to violence, loss of a child, a spouse, or parents. This may be turning points for some, but not for others. So one for me was um, my husband 10 years ago, he had to leave the United States to go back to Mexico and wait 10 years to get his legal permanent residence and wait in Mexico. So since then, that has been a significant turning point for us. We have myself and my children, we have to been living in both countries and commute back and forth. And that has impacted us in enormous ways. So what these concepts have in common is that they all have the potential to cause deep consequences for our reality and the reality of our clients, and some are shared and some are unique. So the example that I have here is for adverse childhood experiences for the study. The ACEs study, and this is something that I think all social workers should be informed about. If you're not, you need to really pay attention and learn more about adverse childhood experiences. And if you're already familiar with this study and with this concept, maybe just get a brushed up. Some examples, well, first, ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and some examples of adverse childhood experiences include childhood abuse and neglect. These include physical, verbal, or sexual abuse. They might witness domestic abuse as well, for example. Neglect would be not having enough to eat or lack of hygiene. They might have parents that lack the ability to take care of them because they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and also household dysfunction. It's another adverse childhood experience that may include a parent being severely depressed, mentally ill, imprisoned, some sort of situation that impacted the children negatively. In the case of children of immigrants, for example, and also other ethnic minority children, I also included environmental factors, and even for other children, because there are risk factors such as, for example, immigration. So all the adverse effects that they experience in their immigration journey, and um, the discrimination that they may experience, the lack of access to services due to their immigration status, fear of being deported. These are some examples for immigrant children. Then, so these are some negative outcomes as a result of the adverse experiences children face. So this study and other research shows that these experiences lead to long-term negative outcomes, that these things don't happen in a vacuum and suddenly, children turn 18 and nothing, there are no long-term consequences. Well, what this study shows is that um, some of those children that have been um, found to experience adverse childhood experiences, um, they're more likely to engage in risky health behaviors as adults. So, including drug or alcohol abuse, smoking, not being physically active, severe obesity, having a lot of sexual partners, attempted suicide. These are some of the negative outcomes that seem that are long-term consequences for people who experience childhood abuse and neglect, and also other types of adverse experiences. So also chronic health conditions, heart attack, heart disease, asthma, mental health issues like depression, physical disability. These are some of the consequences. And also there are some other social consequences, including unemployment, lower income, lower educational attainment, and then early death due to all of these things, like having diabetes, heart attack, stroke. All of those things lead to an early death. And as you can see in this graph, there's a higher risk of more negative outcomes. The more ACEs a child has been exposed to, the more they're at risk of more negative outcomes. So some children have experienced many, many risks during childhood. And again, they are more at risk of negative health and mental health problems. You will get a handout of ACEs screening in this week's module, as well as a brief article to use the ACEs screening in social work practice, and when it might be a good idea to use it and when you should be more thoughtful to use it. So finally, here we have some implications for social work. So when we consider the life course perspective and all the factors that our clients or people around us, is one of the important things in practice is that we should implement using an interdisciplinary approach or collaboration. So when social workers sometimes think that we can, sometimes we think that we can do it all, but we're going to burn ourselves fast. So we want to make sure that we are practicing outside, we're not practicing outside of our scope. So for example, if you're not a therapist, you want to find a therapist to help your client. If you're a medical social worker doing case management, that's what you should focus on and get your client the mental health they need, as well as a specialist or home health if they need it. It's a really comprehensive and holistic approach that stands and comes from the life course perspective or theory. And trauma-informed care has a focus on what has happened to an individual and what traumas they have experienced throughout their life. So this is a direct social work practice that stems from the life course perspective and life course theory, where I'm practitioner and social workers, we can, or you can understand that a behavior or condition are a result of a person's childhood experience. When we understand this, the better we become at recognizing that a problem is a way a person has adapted to cope with their circumstances. So you might find that your client is smoking as a way of coping with anxiety. Another example might be a client who's obese and they have put on weight as an adaptation strategy. So perhaps they want to avoid unwanted sexual behavior because they experienced sexual abuse as a child. So when you hear that an agency or social worker practices trauma-informed care, it means that they are asking their client questions and working with this framework in mind. So basically, this is the theoretical basis for a biopsychosocial assessment when the main tenets of our social work practices that we need to think about how all the components come together to accumulate to this history, to this point in life of your client, and it will help you explain or understand what issue or concern they are facing and what has brought them to your office and what has again impacted them, what life events throughout their life has impacted them and have accumulated to the issue that they are facing today. And so social work interventions that are inclusive of this perspective include home visits. Home visits help you identify and observe the client's living situation and environment. Also, mental health and behavioral health care support, meaning that your client needs with problematic conditions, or maybe they need motivation to quit smoking or assistance with anger management, more behavioral interventions. They might require also referrals to social support and services. They might need direct money payments, food stamps, assistance with food and bills. Finally, our clients might also need prevention education. It's something that we should always consider as part of our practice to offer more information before something peaks to a point of an issue. So the ACEs and life course perspective makes a clear case for the importance of this and how some people may have experienced a great deal of adversity. And we can do a lot to prevent a lot of those negative outcomes. We can provide parenting classes, smoking cessation, mindfulness, trauma-informed care. We have this life course perspective of looking at something, an attempt to explain human behavior. So we need to use it. Again, this might be a helpful perspective to use in some of your cases in your internship, and some of the cases that have been provided to you in class. And also this might even be helpful for your competency exams. You know, sometimes students wonder how to apply the theory. That's a big question the students sometimes have. So I hope this has been of help to you.